Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava, page 42b, top of the page, with the words V'nema Rabbi Akiva Nafshe. The Gemara asks, but let Rabbi Akiva say to himself the same objection that he raised from Rabbi Eliezer's interpretation of the verse, that the owner of an innocuous ox is exempt from paying half a ransom, see 41b. Why is it necessary for the verse to teach this? But isn't compensation for damage caused by an innocuous ox itself paid only from the value of its body? Therefore, its owner can say to the slave's owner, bring it to court, and you will be paid from it. Since the ox was stoned, there is nothing from which he can collect payment. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak said, Rabbi Akiva's interpretation is applicable in a case where its owner slaughtered it first, before it was sentenced to stoning, lest you say that the slave's owner should be paid from the value of the flesh. The verse teaches us that since the ox was subject to be killed, although its owner slaughtered it, the slave's owner should not be paid from it. The Gemara asks, if so, why did Rabbi Akiva raise this objection against Rabbi Eliezer's interpretation? According to Rabbi Eliezer as well, it could be explained as referring to a case where its owner slaughtered it first. The Gemara answers, indeed, Rabbi Eliezer's interpretation could also be explained in this manner. And the reason Rabbi Akiva raised this objection was because he reasons perhaps Rabbi Eliezer has another explanation that is better than this one, and will state it. Rabbi Eliezer did in fact respond with another explanation. The Gemara asks, but let Rabbi Eliezer also answer him that the owner slaughtered it first. Why did he offer a different explanation? The Gemara answers that Rabbi Eliezer could have said to you specifically here, in the case Rabbi Eliezer referred to in his explanation, namely, where the ox intended to kill another animal but killed a person instead. Since the ox was not subject to be killed at all, it might enter your mind to say that he should be liable to pay half a ransom from the ox's body. Therefore, the verse is necessary to exclude the owner from liability to pay half a ransom. But here, since the ox was initially subject to be killed, a verse is not necessary to teach that the owner is exempt from paying half a ransom even if he slaughtered it. The Gemara asks, but according to Rabbi Akiva also, certainly it is so that a verse is not necessary to teach that if the owner slaughters the ox before its verdict, he is exempt from liability. Rather, Rav Ashi said, the above explanation of Rabbi Akiva's interpretation should be rejected, as I heard this following statement from a great man. And who is he? He is Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Hanina. This is what he said. It might enter your mind to say that since Rabbi Akiva says in the Mishnah in 33a that in a case where a person and an innocuous ox damaged each other concurrently, the owner of an innocuous ox that injured a person also pays the full cost of the damage with regard to the difference between the two valuations of the damage, as there is no distinction between an innocuous ox and a forewarned ox with regard to injuries caused to a person. Compensation for the slave is also paid from his superior quality property, not from the body of the ox, just as in a case where a forewarned ox kills a slave. Therefore, its owner cannot say, bring it to court and you will be paid from it. To counter this possibility, the Merciful One wrote, the owner of the ox shall be clear, indicating that he is exempt from this liability. Rabbi Zera said to Rav Ashi, but didn't Rabbi Akiva already break the force of his fist? Meaning, qualify this opinion of his? As it is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Akiva says, one might have thought that the owner of an innocuous ox that injured a person pays compensation from his superior quality property, the same as the owner of a forewarned ox. Therefore, the verse states, according to this judgment shall be done to him. Exodus 21:31, indicating that he pays restitution exclusively from the body of the ox, but he does not pay from his superior quality property, as the word lo also means to it. This negates Rav Asi's explanation of Rabbi Akiva's interpretation. Rather, Rabbah said a different explanation of Rabbi Akiva's statement. The verse is necessary because it might enter your mind to say that since I, referring to the Torah, am more stringent with regard to a four-horned ox that kills a person in the case of a Canaanite slave than in the case of a free man, as in the case of a free man who was worth 1 selah, the owner of the ox gives 1 selah in ransom, and if he was worth 30 selah, he gives 30. But in the case of a Canaanite slave, the Torah imposes a fixed amount. So even if he was worth only 1 selah, the owner gives 30 selah. Therefore, since the Torah is more stringent in the case of a slave, payment for the slave should also be paid from the owner's superior quality property. To counter this, the merciful one writes, the owner of the ox shall be clear, indicating that payment is not required in a case where an innocuous ox kills a slave. It is taught in a Braita in accordance with the explanation of Rava to Rabbi Akiva's statement. The Braita states that with regard to the verse, the owner of the ox shall be clear, Rabbi Akiva says he shall be clear from payment for a Canaanite slave. Rabbi Akiva discusses this interpretation, and could this halacha not be derived through logical inference without the verse, since the Torah deemed him liable to pay for the killing of a slave and deemed him liable for the killing of a free man as well? Just as when the Torah deemed him liable for a free man, you distinguish between an innocuous ox and a four-horned ox, as no ransom is paid in the case of an innocuous ox. So too when the Torah deemed him liable for a slave, let us distinguish between an innocuous ox and a four-horned ox. Furthermore, this halacha could be proven through an a fortiori inference. If in the case of a free man, where he, the owner, gives his full value, you distinguish between an innocuous ox and a four-horned ox. With regard to a slave, where he gives only 30 selah and not more, even if the slave was worth more, is it not logical that we should distinguish between an innocuous ox and a four-horned ox and exempt him from the liability of an innocuous ox? Rabbi Akiva rejects this opinion. No, one could disagree and say that I, referring to the Torah, am more stringent with regard to the case of a slave than with regard to that of a free man. As for a free man worth 1 selah, the ox's owner gives only 1 selah, and if he is worth 30 selah, he gives 30. But in the case of a slave, even if he was worth only 1 selah, he gives 30 selah. Therefore, one might have thought that he should be liable to pay for a slave killed by his innocuous ox. To counter this, the verse states, the owner of the ox shall be clear, indicating that he shall be clear from paying compensation for a slave. The sages taught the verse states with regard to a four-horned ox, but if the ox was goring in time past and warning has been given to his owner, and he has not secured it, and they killed a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned. Exodus 21:29. Rabbi Akiva said, and what does this come to teach us? If it is to deem the owner liable for the killing of a woman, just as for the killing of a man, this is already stated with regard to an innocuous ox, where it is stated, where an ox gores a man or a woman, and they die, the ox shall be stoned. Exodus 21:28. Rather, the verse is stated to compare a woman to a man with regard to another issue, just as with regard to a man, payment for his injuries is paid for his heirs, so too, with regard to a woman, payment for her injuries is paid to her heirs and not to her husband. The Gemara asks, and does Rabbi Akiva hold that a husband does not inherit from his wife? But isn't it taught in a Braita? The verse states, and he shall inherit it, Numbers 27:11. From here it is derived that the husband inherits from his wife, as Ota also means her. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Reish Lakish said, Rabbi Akiva says, that her heirs and not her husband receive the payment only with regard to ransom, since it is paid only posthumously and is therefore considered property due to her. And the husband does not take in the inheritance the property due to the deceased as he does the property she possessed. For instance, an inheritance that would have gone to the woman had she been alive is not awarded to the husband, but rather to other heirs. What is the reason for the assumption that even if it is clear that the victim is about to die, the husband is not owed ransom? The verse states, and it killed a man or a woman. The ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death. Also shall be put to death. If a ransom is laid on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatsoever is laid on him. Exodus 21:29 and 30, indicating that the owner's liability to pay ransom is dependent on the ox's liability to be stoned, which, in turn, applies only after the death of the victim. The Gemara asks, and with regard to damages, did Rabbi Akiva not say that damages due to a wife are paid to her heirs and not to her husband, just as with regard to ransom? But isn't it taught in a Braita, if an assailant struck the woman and her offspring emerged due to miscarriage, he gives compensation for damage and pain to the woman and compensation for miscarried offspring to the husband? If the husband is not alive, he gives the compensation for the offspring to his heirs. If the woman is not alive, he gives the payment owed to her heirs. If she was a Canaanite maidservant and then she was emancipated,